But it's more about matching what I need in the moment with the food itself. And if I'm doing that, then I'm going to be supporting myself no matter what it is that I'm doing.
Hi, my name's Isabel Donnelly, and welcome to The Sober Spill. Today we are here with dietitian Mallory Page. I was excited to have her on because the tagline I saw on your Instagram is feeling at home in your body without shrinking it. And I think that's incredibly important because, as I'm sure you see a lot of the time, it's like, oh, once you get here, this is when you're going to feel okay, which we know is an illusion. So for the people that don't know you, who are you?
Yeah, as she said, I'm a dietitian. First of all, I'm so excited to be here and talk about this. And you already mentioned the piece of body image that I love, but ultimately, as a dietitian, I came to the place where I work with people on their relationship with food and their body because, like many, I went through my own journey, right? So people always ask, well, how did you get into this? And I go, oh, well, in the worst way possible, because I went into becoming a dietitian because I wanted to help other people be healthy, which was really at the time my unknown to me eating disorder speaking, because I had orthorexia, essentially an obsession with being healthy to the point that it became unhealthy. And it wasn't until I went to college and I started to learn some things and also just go through real life where I realized, oh, maybe what I'm doing is not so healthy, even though on the outside it looks very healthy. So I ended up going into this field and for that reason, and also because I myself was able to see, oh, the goalpost for my body kept moving. The perfection from food kept getting, more and more rule oriented. And so it never really ends. It just keeps going and going and going. And I want to help people get out of that cycle.
And that's the pipeline of people with like disordered eating behaviors to dietitian is so strong. Like that's such a common thing. But it's also incredibly brave because with dietitians, it's like working with an eating disordered population is so challenging because for that population, a lot of times you're immediately the enemy and just the way to their eating disorders work. And when it takes over their brain, like you're immediately the enemy to that very critical feeling, like piece of self-preservation.
It's so interesting you mentioned that pipeline because someone commented about that the other day on one of my posts. And I think they were kind of trying to have a gotcha moment, but I thought this is such a good thing to talk about because it is somewhat strange from the outside if you think, why are so many dietitians now that like used to have disordered eating or eating disorders in this field? But so many people's stories are just like mine. Think about that high school to college timeline. Not that you can't have disordered eating or eating disorders at any time, right? But it's such a high pressure time of your life. And that's also when we have to just, decide what you want to do for the rest of your life and everything. And dietetics too, once you get in it, you're in. It's very hard to switch. And so I think it's kind of it's funny that it works that way, but also I think it happens exactly the way it needs to because of exactly what you said. I always find that the empathy that I'm able to have from being in the position that my client has been in, of course, in my own way, is just so important because when you hear them maybe saying that you're their worst enemy or whatever else it is, you realize, yeah, and I thought the same exact thing because my eating disorder was controlling me. And it did say that that person was the enemy. And it's understandable because that's what it wants you to think. That's how it keeps its power.
And that's also the cool thing, like an experience I've had with a dietitian that I credit as really saving my life is when she started to personify the eating disorder as I would be saying something that was just objectively like not based in reality. And she's like, I'm not even talking to you anymore. I'm talking to your eating disorder. And I was like, oh,
Yes.
which is so
Yes.
crazy. And it's in the same way with the addiction field, the like recovered addict to social worker pipeline, also incredibly strong.
Yeah, it's just once you get out of that space and you recognize how much better life can be, it's so hard to not want to help other people to get there, I think, because you just realize what it was like to be in that space of struggling so much and have even like a slight light from at the end of the tunnel and then to reach the end of the tunnel and you're like, I have to help other people get there because it is something special to hear from someone that also was in the tunnel and felt like there was no light, to know, oh, wow, they did this too.
Yeah, and then also having the flexibility to acknowledge, like, where the person's at and also
Mhm.
understanding, like, when they slide back because this isn't like a straight, shot. This isn't a linear journey, and so being able to have empathy too when it's like, "Yeah, it's okay. This is just part of it." But I'm wondering, when did you start to understand that you had orthorexia? Because that's so common at this point, and it's something that's even celebrated. Like Instagram and TikTok is a cesspool of like orthorexic people being like, "Do this and you'll be happy." So when did you start realizing that was an issue?
It was around my second year in college, but I also feel like I didn't really move out of the denial phase until more like my junior year of college. And the reason I realized it was because my mental health was actually deteriorating so badly that I almost had to come to terms with the things that were impacting me. And that was really challenging because, like you were saying, I was very heavily praised in high school and in college for the way that I ate and the way that I exercised and even the way that I looked. I did not look quote unquote sick like we imagine it to be. And so everyone really just thought I was healthy. And then even, being in school to become a dietitian, that kind of further proved that it was just normal. And there were some behaviors I started to dabble into that I think gave people some pause. But overall, it was very well received. And so once I got into that space where my mental health was becoming so bad, I ultimately started to deal with some habits like binging and stuff that I hadn't dealt with that started to really throw off my eating disorder in the way that it was originally presenting. And I think that's where I finally was able to start to realize, oh, this isn't normal to be experiencing it. And I was trying to experience life more in college. My first year, I just stayed in all those rules. And then when I started to do that, I realized, wow, I actually do feel very inhibited by a lot of things. I think with orthorexia or any eating disorder, you can create an environment of which you can convince yourself that you're not restricted or controlled because your entire environment and lifestyle supports your rules seeming normal. But when I started to step out of that, I recognized, yeah, but this isn't normal in the way that other people can exist. And why can they do that? And I can't do it without having a panic attack.
Mm. Yeah, when the emotional response doesn't match what's going on. And I
Mhm.
think also having the background as a person in recovery can help mitigate some of the shame because a lot of the behaviors that go on with eating disorders can feel very shameful because some of them are objectively like just not palatable for other people to hear about. And so then you feel ashamed about it. It just perpetuates that and it can get incredibly isolating. And it's so specific to each person that has an eating disorder. And so I would imagine like a term we use in the addiction recovery field is you can't bullshit a bullshitter. Like working with other addicts, it's like, oh no, you think this and that's because of this. So in the same way, I'm sure like that mirrors in your career too.
100%. And I think that it gives that important context too, like we were talking about, of how much the eating disorder can convince us that a behavior is supportive, not even just from an external perspective, but an internal one. So, what I mean by that is now what I've come to realize that I obviously did not know at the time was that my eating disorder was created as a function to cope with a bunch of different things, right? Both like the bigger T trauma, but also just the stresses that accumulate over your life that everyone can have. And so there were a lot of things that I did as a function to create safety and control. And so it wasn't even just always the eating disorder coming in to tell me that this felt safe. It was, oh, well, this is life or death to maintain this sense of safety. And I think that's also something that's so important with my clients, and especially people with orthorexia or with an untraditional quote unquote eating disorder, or when you're working with addiction, which and other things in conjunction with this. It's like realizing how much this functions to support, that sometimes we can convince ourselves, oh no, like my walking habits are just to help me feel good. It's like, well, are
I
they
need
though? You know?
20,000 steps. It's for me to feel healthy. My Apple Watch says I have to. Like,
Yes,
crazy.
exactly. Oh, exactly.
Yeah, I'm so familiar with that. And I also appreciate when I was reading some of your story on your website too, you've talked about how sometimes, or when you first, I keep wanting to say got sober, but that's like not what that is. But when you first got into recovery, it was hard for you to seek help because you weren't like medically underweight. You weren't meeting like all of these specific criteria that would make you assume like, oh, I have an eating disorder, when realistically we know it's between like what 6 and 10% of people of eating disorders are actually medically underweight. And that can gatekeep people from going to treatment in a pretty significant way.
Yeah, it was very hard for me also because, of course, like many people with eating disorders or with addiction, you have the unicorn syndrome, right? Oh, I'm the
Mm,
exception, right? No one is dealing with it like I'm dealing with it. And you often have low self esteem. So, why would you even believe your problems are serious enough when you already don't really believe in yourself a lot of the time? So, I was dealing with all of that as an underlying belief system. And then also on top of that, I didn't present normally. So it would have been challenging for me to get into certain types of treatment. And that's why I work with the people I do. I mean, I work with all people that resonate with me that are a medical fit. But at the end of the day, I saw there is such a big gap here. And we need to speak to these people that feel this way, like I felt, and even that did have some challenge in finding the right type of support that is going to look at the full picture because I was dealing with some other pretty pressing mental health stuff and I was dealing with some pretty detrimental behaviors that I was engaging in. So, how are we managing all of those things at the same time? And that can feel complicated to navigate, but it is so worth it to navigate it with someone else because you think you can navigate it on your own, but as we were talking about, you're really bartering with your eating disorder and your negative voice half the time. So, it does not have your best interest in mind.
no, yeah, not at all. And it gatekeeps treatment in a significant way. I know for me in the past, there have been times where I've needed to seek treatment and I know this and I wait until I hit medically underweight and I'm like, cool, I proved it to myself. I'll go, which is so crazy. And
Mhm.
even like the diagnostic criteria and the DSM is gatekeepy of it too.
Yeah.
Like I believe the diagnostic criteria for anorexia, one of them is like a specific BMI, which is
Yeah.
so limiting.
Mhm. Yeah, it is. It's a specific BMI, which is just very challenging as someone that does not believe in that system and also just doesn't believe in the whole idea of atypical anorexia, which essentially the only thing that creates atypical is being in a BMI range that is not what fits anorexia. And I think you have to imagine who it is that we're talking to and how that impacts them. To be told, oh, you're atypical, what could be worse to hear than that when you're already struggling?
Totally. And that's something that I always remind clients because a lot of times working in this field, if we have clients that come in with a secondary diagnosis of an eating disorder, they get referred to me and I'll meet
Mhm.
with them. And I'm like, the BMI system was created when people were still prescribing cocaine for headaches. So,
Yes.
like, are you really going to go off of that? Because that's
Literally.
nuts.
Exactly. It was like a C. They were measuring all these different ways to do this. And I think that system got like a C minus or a C plus, and the other ones got D's. And they're like, let's go with it.
Yeah.
And now it's fundamental to our medical system. I'm like, hmm. And of course, it was also only done on men, as
Mm.
usual, right? So that makes it great.
You're telling me, dude. I could go on forever about that. It drives me insane. Um, Totally.
I'm Ricky, recovery support clinician here at Mountainside. We offer a healthcare professionals program for physicians, nurses, dentists, and therapists. Our team of board-certified addiction specialists provide discreet, comprehensive treatment for substance use and co-occurring disorders. We're here to help you achieve sustainable recovery with a plan built around your unique needs. Reach out to admissions at mountainside.com for more details.
I'm sure you see a lot of crossover with substance use disorder, because we know like 50% of people who are diagnosed with some form of disordered eating also misuse substances to some degree.
Yes, I do see a ton of that. And whether it be that someone is in the journey where they're now recovered or they're sober or they're in the process or feeling like they're longer in their recovery or they're even exploring it, let's say they don't necessarily feel like they have, and this could go into the whole conversation we were just talking about, right? If they don't have the same type of problem, but they start to recognize as they work through this, I feel like I'm using substances in a way that maybe doesn't actually make me feel really good, or they're in active recovery with both. Obviously, each of those has different kind of support teams I'm always pulling in because I'm not going to be working with someone that's trying to actively recover by myself. But I think that it's so important because, like we were just talking about with coping, really an eating disorder is just a maladaptive coping mechanism or disordered eating, right? Which oftentimes it's the same thing we see in addiction. It's like there's always a reason. It's not just like people go into these things wanting to have an eating disorder, wanting to have an addiction, right? So I'm always very, very careful when I'm working with someone of monitoring the other things that could become the next unhealthy coping mechanism, and how do we actually adapt into or adaptive and supporting ways of coping rather than just continuing to create a new way of coping that's really just looking like we're improving one area when really we're maybe just moving it to another, which we do not want.
Totally. And I find it very respectable that you're talking about bringing in other providers and like remaining within your scope of practice.
Yes.
That's always the sign of like a good clinician, I think. Otherwise, it's like when someone's like, I'm going to take care of all of it. And I'm like, but girl, like you need, especially with eating disorders, you need super specific language. You need specific training. Otherwise, you can be doing so much harm. But like you were saying, moving into a different form of maladaptive coping, that's most often when we see this popping up, because it's you get sober, you no longer have that thing that gave you that sense of control. And so now you're like, what other way can I immediately access something that is going to make me feel better? Like, I don't know how my feelings are going to feel, but I know how this is going to make me feel. And so this is a safer option for me.
Yeah, exactly. And that's always the thing that I find the most challenging about working within the realm of disordered relationships with food is just how convenient they are, in the sense that, and for anyone not watching this, I did quote unquote with that because it's not convenient in a positive way, right? But for me, that's kind of how I got into developing the challenges is I just realized, well, I have to eat every day. I have to eat multiple times a day. And so and also when you start to work on food in any way, like start to adapt the way that you engage with food, there's a lot of ways that you can be praised and supported, like we were talking about. So I think it's really easy to get kind of addicted to that. And I say addicted lightly because really I'm not talking about true addiction, but very kind of reliant on some of that external type of praise, and even the way you can get attached to how you look or the meal itself. There's just so much to it that you can engage in so many moments of the day to provide what it is that you're kind of looking for.
Totally. And I think it's hard when, like a lot of the wellness influencer, I'm
Yes.
also afraid who's not listening or watching this quote and quoting that because, there can be a lot of rhetoric around like, this is what will make you feel better. Eating this, eating that, like all of the fad diets, like we see the emphasis on protein so aggressively, like protein popcorn, protein everything. I saw a post on Instagram that was like, yeah, protein this, protein that. Have you ever gone on a long walk with a friend who you love? Like, how does that feel? But how do you work with dispelling that with clients when they're getting all of this outside information that's stating otherwise?
It's definitely the first step that we take because of how much of an impact it has, and also how much of an impact it can have to change it. So a lot of what we hear nowadays is food noise, right? Which essentially is encapsulating the consistent thoughts that you have about food, whether that be after a meal, when you feel guilty all day long. And I will often say that when we're talking about something like food noise, the easiest way to change it is to remove the constant input of noise about food, which is
Mm.
wellness influencers, honestly, anyone. This can even be recovery accounts. I tell people, I don't care if you want to unfollow me. Whatever makes you start to think about things more with food in a way that is not supportive to you, then that is not for you at this time. Even if you think that's the best person ever and you adore them, right? Because ultimately, it isn't about whether what they're sharing is quote unquote right. It's about how it is making you feel in that moment. And then also with wellness influencers, it's so rare for me that I find one that I think is actually supportive, because so much of the time they're giving what I call prescriptive advice, right? So they're telling you, this is what you need to do, and then you will feel like this. But
Mm.
that is not how nutrition and wellness work. And anyone that tells you that should already be a red flag, because our bodies are way too complex to say there is one way of doing something that is going to work. So whenever people start to get caught up in the weeds of, well, but they say that you should have this much protein, or that sugar is addictive and it's going to kill me, or whatever else it may be, of course, I can bring them the science that actually refutes these points, which can be really helpful for our logical brains. But at the end of the day, I always say, yes, and peanut butter could save someone's life or it could kill someone. So we
Mm.
really just need to think about the fact that there is no such thing as one thing that's going to work. And I love to use like analogies of relationships for this, because it often can help people of like, is there one type of relationship, even if you have similar values that you care about, that is going to work the same for you as someone else? No. Even if you want the loyalty and caring person and attentive, you and someone else aren't going to end up marrying the exact same person, unless you're into that, which is fine. But most of the time,
Yeah.
that doesn't happen.
If that's your thing, power to you. But yeah, period. But and that's yeah, if anything starts off with a body check, I'm like V
Ugh,
code. You're out, girl. Totally. Or like demonizing different foods, like understanding that everything. I am very adamant about that, even like working in this treatment space, because it's so natural and learned to be like, oh, well, this food's bad
yes.
for you. And that everything in moderation, I think, is
Mhm.
really helpful.
Yeah, exactly. I think that whenever we get into the territory of moralizing too, it's always a slippery slope, because if you say something is good or something is bad, you already know you've infused morals into it, because ultimately that is subjective. It's why someone in the eating vegan and someone eating keto is going to say completely different things are good and bad. And even if there are overarching beliefs our society may have, where more people say this is good or more people say it's bad, we know that's not inherently true, because the food is just the food, right? Food is just an entity. The way that we interact with it is then what creates our belief system. And then that's also what creates the guilt that we can experience. Because if you're telling yourself that something is bad and then you engage with it, you morally feel like you're doing something wrong, rather than being able to be neutral and say, oh, this is a food. This one may have more nutrients, or this one may be more fueling, or this one may be really good for connection or experiences or whatever else it is. And then you can conceptualize, oh, this is every food can support me unless I'm allergic to it, right? But it's more about matching what I need in the moment with the food itself. And if I'm doing that, then I'm going to be supporting myself no matter what it is that I'm doing.
Totally. And I think that's also with the everything in moderation and intuitive eating, that's also where we start to move into like body neutrality and harm reduction in eating disorders. Cause I think that sometimes body acceptance, like when that was really pushed, I found that that could be a little bit isolating, where sometimes it doesn't feel attainable to be like, I like my body. Like sometimes that just isn't realistic for me or for plenty of other people. And so body neutrality and having that in itself is almost a form of harm reduction because it's much more accessible to a lot of people.
Yeah, I always say that we should think about body image as a relationship rather than an end goal. And in a relationship, you don't, even if you love someone, you are not going to like them every second of the day. You just will not. There will be even maybe months or years of time where you feel less connected to them. And that is the reality of how we engage with our body as well. And if we can have that more neutral baseline that we come back to of even when I'm struggling with this person, or even when I'm absolutely in the honeymoon phase and adore this person, right? Which you can say the person is your body, I am going to be okay. That is what's so key because that's the difference, I think, as someone that is fully recovered and in such a good place with my body image. It is not that every second of the day I love how I look or my body. It's that I don't think about my body that much. And if I do engage with my body, like I've seen it in the mirror, whatever it is, and let's say on a random day, I don't feel like it's just really resonating with me, it does not change my whole day. My whole life isn't ruined, which it used to. Oh my gosh, it used to, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's what's so critical. And like you said, just giving yourself more of a realistic or resonant goal with body image, oh, it can feel so much more liberating and even just remove some of that intense pressure you can feel of like, I gotta always like my body to have good body image.
Yeah, no, and even the way that you explain that, like, I love the relationship analogy. It also works to kind of externalize it, like externalize your eating disorder as something separate than you. Because I think untangling those two things is so important. And that's an approach we use with substance abuse too, where it is like that understanding, like, is this one of my core values? Is this something I care about? Or does my eating disorder really care about this? Like, and once you're able to separate that, it's so much easier. I remember like going when I was in early recovery, going and like getting a bagel, and I had the instinct to like scoop out all the outsides or the insides. And I was like, I want the bagel. My eating disorder wants to do that. It doesn't taste better if I do that. And that's so helpful too.
Yeah, I'm so big on thinking about the healing of your eating disorder as somewhat of this separating and then regeneration or honing in on your true morals and beliefs within it, because I think it can just be that guiding compass as you go through recovery or as you recover of asking yourself, okay, does this truly align with my morals or does it not? And it just creates such a clear path. It doesn't always mean either that you know how to respond to it in that moment. You may identify, you know what, this doesn't actually align with what I want my long-term morals to be, and I can't act on that in a different way than I want in this moment, but I can acknowledge and have awareness around that and I can know where I want to go, which in and of itself can be inspiring, right? So I think that's always important too.
And that also kind of loops into IFS therapy, which was
Mhm.
originally designed to treat eating disorder clients. Because the guy
Yeah.
was like, I don't know how to deal with these people. And so he
Yeah.
created this whole method for it.
Yeah, I
Um,
think IFS is absolutely amazing, especially when we're talking about how I feel like I'm not an absolute expert on IFS. I'm actually learning more about it at this current time because I've used it in my own therapy and different stuff. But I have the lens of understanding of which I can at least hear a client and understand what they're talking about when they're bringing that into our conversations. And I often find that different parts of the person can even be attached to different pieces of the eating disorder, right? Like body image could be attached to this 3-year-old version of you that became stunted at that time and was attached to the body image in a different way. And then food could have a different time and exercise. So it's great to be able to understand the complexities and the different time periods or pieces of you that are attached to the eating disorder in different ways.
Totally. I'm a big IFS girly in my own like therapy. And I was like, this is crazy. Like there was so much stuff that I couldn't work through to save my life in talk therapy. And then they threw IFS at it. And I was like, oh my God, I can function as a normal human being. This is amazing.
Yes,
It's
IFS
so
and
good.
EMDR and somatic therapy are life-saving for the intellectualizers, the people that don't want
Mhm.
to feel, aka raise your hand, I'm joining the
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
So,
And also hello to your cat. I just saw
yes, he always wants to come in whenever I'm busy. When I'm not busy, he is totally disinterested in me.
I get my cat's dysregulated emotionally and very codependent, so I
Yeah.
very much understand that. But so when you're working with clients and you're starting to look at it from a harm reduction model, what does that look like? 'Cause I think that's a newer approach too to eating disorders where it's less black and white. 'Cause eating disorder itself is black and white, so it can be healing to just start to like kind of live in the gray.
Yeah, because I think our traditional model when we think about healing eating disorders is a treatment model, right? So it was someone has anorexia, they're low BMI, they go to treatment, they can be even an inpatient, they're working their way through the different types of treatment facilities, which in those environments, you're in an enclosed environment, right? With people, you're constantly monitored, and your goal in those environments is to put on weight as quickly as possible to try to maintain life. Now, that's the model that they then try to apply to every eating disorder. And there can be times, I'm not trying to speak against treatment, right? There's times where that is suitable and supportive, and there are times where that just does not make sense. And even if someone went into treatment and they had other things they were going on, let's say like addiction, that can exacerbate their overall condition. And so when I think about healing eating disorders, I like to think about the full picture and all of the different things that we're going to be working with, from mental health to are they engaged in other types of active addiction, sometimes even exercise. Although related to the eating disorder, we have to monitor, okay, where are we at with that? And all of these different things. And I always think about, instead of saying, okay, you're here now, I'm going to give you this exact meal plan and we're going to take all of these things away that you're using to cope. How can we take the next step that is the most feasible, that is ultimately going to reduce our harm overall, but not be so intense, so aggressive that we actually are then making things even worse? And I find that that approach, especially for certain people, is just absolutely critical, especially because we were talking about this a bit earlier. Then let's say that you do have some regression. You, instead of going from here, like all the way at the top, doing all of the recovery habits to all the way back to your eating disorder, you're often taking one step down or a couple steps down, which ultimately does reduce harm. And it doesn't always look like it's quote unquote making the same amount of progress in that time, but it actually is a lot of progress when you look at it, especially as you navigate different life stressors and things that you could be dealing with amongst your recovery.
Totally. And I also think that harm reduction can give the person recovering some autonomy because that typical like treatment model removes all autonomy, like in some cases for good reason, but you can't go to the bathroom without the door being open, like very basic um, pieces of privacy. You can be very stripped, especially having that trauma of like being tubed, like all of the things that really are end up like they're supposed to be supportive and once again sometimes necessary, but they end up being more traumatic in the long run.
Yeah, and that is the challenge. I work with a lot of people that have trauma from their recovery in more traditional treatment centers, and ultimately they're grateful for that trauma versus potentially not even existing, but it doesn't take away that at different times we need different approaches. And I think that when, as a field or as providers, we don't allow for any autonomy or to give the client any ability to communicate, or we just say, I know a lot of people that it's been something along the lines of, oh, you're not engaging in the recovery behaviors, so you're not trying. I can't help you. That to me is very bothersome, because why are we expecting someone to never have times where they are challenged or they struggle or whatever else it is? I think there's still so much we can do within a a journey of someone that is struggling to, like you're saying, reduce their harm overall. So I'm very passionate about that, because I just don't think that the black and white approach is what's going to create recovery for all of us in a way that's sustainable.
Yeah, and sometimes it's even the smallest things where I know first, like if I'm given a full meal plan while I'm like incredibly sick and in the depths of that, I've cried before because I'm like, what do you mean you want me to eat bread twice in a day? You're sick. You're a crazy person. How dare you? But just being like, how about we integrate like an egg yolk and not just egg
Yes.
whites or something small like that that can make a massive difference.
And ultimately, what we're doing when we're working on integrations is we're working on the ability to handle the emotions associated with the change. So when we go from one emotional extreme to the other, we are often not introducing the coping to match what that person needs. So if you are not in a scenario where someone has a plethora of coping skills and then you make them do all of this stuff at once, it can just make everything worse. And versus when you say, like, for example, an egg yolk, then you can think, okay, what is this bringing up for me? And it's so much more plausible to deal with that in that type of environment and without so much extremity.
Totally. And what do you think about, because this is an interesting difference I find between substance use and eating disorder treatment is substance use treatment's very peer-to-peer support, whereas eating disorder treatment, like eating disorders can be so contagious.
Yeah.
And it can be so triggering for other people. Like, what do you recommend for if people are seeking out some sort of community? Like, who should they be reaching out to?
Yeah, this is actually one of the most challenging parts. I mean, there's two parts of an eating disorder that I think are really challenging. Is one that it's so hard to have abstinence in the same way that you can other types of
Totally.
addiction, right? Because you can't, our goal is not to not eat. That would be bad, right? And then the other is the role that eating disorders and peer support it's not necessarily the same type of support unless the person's in the right place. So for example, my program, Live Unrestricted, everyone in there, I'm doing a chat with them beforehand. And so I know I'm cultivating an environment of safety and it's monitored. So if you can be in monitored environments where there is someone that you know is going to support facilitating helpful conversations, I think that is the key. And then I also think the key is having, and this is so much easier said than done, but having really strong boundaries for yourself, that if you notice someone that has traditionally been really supportive as a friend in your recovery is really struggling, of course, it's not like you can't be friends, but maybe you have to navigate if, right now it's not supportive for me to talk about this. It's not you, it's just me, even if maybe it does feel like it's them, because we really ultimately have to remember that you can't support others unless you yourself are taking care of you.
Totally. And what inspired you to not just obviously we've talked about how you became a dietitian, but creating this online community? How did it transform into that?
I honestly created what I wished I would have had. That is what I did. I thought when I was navigating support, I struggled with, as we talked about, talk therapy, even though I think talk therapy is very useful. It just, for me, didn't end up making enough of an impact on the eating disorder. I struggled with even trying to be with dietitians because sometimes it felt very extreme. But I also worked with some incredible people too that provided me a lot. And I thought, what would I have wanted? I would have wanted a combination between education that was oriented towards changing my mindset and helping me work through my emotions, a community so I could talk with other people that were experiencing what I was experiencing, have group and kind of peer support in a live setting where I'm also guided by someone that can help me. 24/7 kind of chat, not necessarily 24/7, right? But you can post at any time so that you feel like you don't have to wait in between meetings. And then also one-on-one support so that you feel like you're not just that unicorn, so that you get that unicorn piece of you to feel heard. And so I essentially combined all of that and made it into a year program because even though your eating disorder never wants to think it will take that long, I
Ugh,
know for a fact that it can take longer. It can, it can take all the time. But for the person that I usually am working with too, they're in that stage of recovery that you may even know about too, as you've seen people where it's like you are so much better than you used to be, but also there's still more to go. And so we
yeah.
talk a lot about coping and identity and the, you know, steps that it really requires to get to that fully recovered state. And so you want to think that will take a month, but ultimately it doesn't just take that amount of time.
I know you wish, right? And it's so funny the overlap too, because the unicorn piece in sobriety and like 12-step programs, we have our own term for it. It's terminal uniqueness. Cause like, yeah, you can be like, oh, you're different, you're gonna die if you want to be different. Like that's what that is.
Oh, so true.
I know, it's so funny. It's so funny. And so where can people find you and like have access to? Because you have like private clients, and then it seems like you have like coaching as well.
Yeah, I am on all the social platforms. It's Mallory J Page. You just add a J between my name, and you can kind of find all my different things in that one space. Instagram's kind of my main hub, but I'm on TikTok and other things too. And from there, you'll find I have a variety of different resources, from free quizzes to communities to working with me, and anywhere from walkthrough course to a one-on-one capacity to my program that I was just describing is called Live Unrestricted. So, and I have a podcast as well. So I try to just diversify. So wherever you're at, I can meet you in what it is that you need, whether that's like, I'm ready to get done with this and I want to have actual hands-on support, or I'm still dipping my toe into imagining this as my reality of healing.
I like that you mentioned that, because a lot of times before the recovery, there's like, because sometimes it doesn't feel attainable and it almost feels more scary to hope that
Yes.
you could be recovered, because what does that look like? But there
Mhm.
definitely is that part of the stages of change, contemplation, where it's like, I might. I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm going to yet, but I'm thinking about it.
Maybe,
Yeah.
but maybe. And the
Yeah.
maybe is what we need.
Yeah. And are the quizzes the same, where it's like meeting to like, do you need treatment? Is that what that means?
Yeah, I have a quiz that basically, this is one of my favorite resources. I basically have a quiz that will assess what is fueling your food noise. And then I have a program that walks you through how to do it. That's like $27. It's pretty inexpensive. And because I won't go into the whole thing, but there's 3 different things that create food noise, right? Physical, mental, or emotional deficits. And a lot of people only think of the physical, not the mental or emotional. So I can assess pretty accurately from this quiz where you're at. And then it will give you an idea of the areas of which are creating all these thoughts about food. And it's not just, oh, I'm not eating enough. It's like, how are you dealing with things emotionally? And do you restrict yourself on a mental basis and all that stuff?
And one last question. This is more of a personal curiosity, I
Yeah.
guess, but I've been wondering, like when I was in treatment, GLP-1s weren't a thing. But I can only imagine if I was active in my eating disorder, how I'd be like lying on like everything to get that. Have you seen an influx of that in like a maladaptive sense?
Yeah, it's definitely been really challenging in whether someone is engaging with it themselves and wanting it, or they're seeing other people engage in it. It's
Yeah.
definitely been just such a pressure on body image, and it feels like a stark contrast too from some of the progress we felt like we made in around the 2020 2021 time. So not only have I seen sometimes where it's quite medically dangerous because of, like you're saying, the accessibility to it, which I'm usually not working with that client because they're just not medically like a match if they're like in such an extreme place, right? But I've still
Mhm.
seen that. Or just dealing with the repercussions of being surrounded by people that are engaging with this when it's not really a fit for them, and then pressuring others to say, well, you should just do it. It's like someone's trying to work through their eating disorder and now feeling like there's this other route that maybe in the past didn't feel like it was there, you know?
Totally. Yeah. Having people, because even in a recovered space, there's definitely a part of me when I start to have like more coworkers or more friends who might
Mhm.
be going on it where I'm like, I'm like, wait a minute.
What's going on
uh,
here?
yeah, hold on. A quick quiz online. Like, yeah, it's so crazy. Yeah, we're living in a weird time. And I'm curious to see how therapy ends up adapting to that over time.
Yeah, I think also once we just truly get a sense for what the true medical reality is of the drugs, like that's going to make a big difference too, because we always have this phase with anything new. And this isn't me saying it's not supportive, but we see people that are clearly not medically aligned with the drug taking it. So what will that create then? And hopefully nothing very detrimental, knock on wood. But I think that will also be a very interesting landscape to navigate too.
Yeah, I've seen people post online that's like, better get on one because that class action lawsuit's going to go crazy. I think
Oh my
so funny.
gosh.
Yeah, it's the same way with the opioid epidemic where it's everyone, they're like, this is a miracle drug. It's not addictive. It's going to save your life. And then here we are, today. So it's definitely super interesting. But thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure talking to you about this.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved getting to chat about it all.
I know it's one of my passions, 100%. And we'll link all of Mallory's socials down below. So if you want to check her out and see a little bit more in depth about what this looks like, check it out. But other than that, we'll see you next week.
If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, Mountainside can help. Call 860-365-6764 to speak with our caring treatment team.